All right, board gaming enthusiasts, wargaming enthusiasts, D&D, I should say RPG enthusiasts. I've got an incoming mailbag here asking about logging games, keeping track of games. And I wanted to jump into that a little bit, and for some of the various reasons that I've done that, I do that, I continue to do that from the perspective of the hobby, not only as a method of self-improvement, because I'm always looking to improve myself in whatever discipline, and as much as board gaming and wargaming and D&D is a hobby, I'm looking to be the absolute best that I can, but also just to kind of notice certain trends in gaming or certain aspects of my player personality. So we're going to jump into these three areas. As a completionist, as a hobbyist with poor impulse control, lots of different board games, lots of different miniatures. You know, I'm good. My army's great. I'm really happy about it. I don't need any more miniatures. And then next thing you know, I'm like, I don't know where these 10 mechs showed up. I just couldn't help myself. I mean, if you're in the board gaming or miniature wargaming community, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So jumping in with miniature games, Warhammer 40,000. For most of my 40K start, I didn't really keep track of anything. We did have like a little player trophy that would kind of pass hands when I was playing with a bunch of my friends. Whoever kind of won the game would hold the battle trophy till next week. So you'd kind of see who could hold it for the longest that it could. It was maybe 4 or 5 of us playing 40K, and we'd all just play on one tabletop, one against many. It's the early days of 40K. We didn't really know what the heck we were doing, but it was a lot of fun. When I formally joined the Battle for Salvation Gaming Club, that's when I started to log my games. And the start of that really was, we were going to the grand tournament. Remember when Games Workshop actually supported the community? We were going to the GT down in Baltimore, and I had to get good fast with my army. Those of you who have been on this journey with me for some time might recall the name Way of Sam Han. That is a name that I have not heard spoken in some time. But essentially, I had just started my Sam Han Eldar army. No idea how to play it. And in like 3 months or so, we were going down to the GT, and I had to get good fast, like Dark Souls good. So I started playing games at the club and just kind of writing down turn by turn what I was doing, what my opponent was doing, to analyze it. Then I started taking some pictures of it, key points, or every turn, picture of picture, and then printing it out and drawing some arrows of what was going on, just to get an idea of, like, did I make the right decision? Was this correct? Was this not correct? And flow from there. And then I had the idea, well, let's just start a blog, because I'm running out of time. Let's start a blog. Blogs were kind of new. Back then, it was a thing. And I would post up my battle reports, win or lose. I post up my thoughts. And I sent emails out to other 40K friends and basically like, hey, check out my stuff. But please, if you have a moment, really blast into me. I want to know what I did wrong. I want to know what you would do. I'd want to know if you're a Space Marine player, how you take my army apart. All these aspects I really, really want to know. So the blog kind of took off. That leads to a YouTube channel that led to Fritz 40K, that leads to where we are here and now. Up until a number of years ago, I tried to log every 40K game just to analyze, just to see. And it's been interesting to go back. And some of those analysis games they might just be a couple of lines, like I did this, I did that. They might have some pictures. They might have some drawings. They might be really intense. They might not. But that was really instrumental into helping me when I was playing competitive 40K, not only cut down my learning curve, but come up with ideas like the null deployment, come up with different list building ideas. I really tried to get independent of army, to step out of that GW paradigm where it's like, this is the army of the month, so just buy these models and auto win. I mean, that works, and sometimes I would do that. But at other times, it was like, I really want to play some crazy idea. What's some of the tactica that we want to utilize? Those who've been playing 40K forever, perfect idea. When Necrons actually follow the Star Gods, the Nightmare Shroud, Destroyer Lord, Scarab Bodyguards, Nightmare Shroud, and just zipping up and down the back lines, getting 2+ invulnerable saves. and popping off Nightmare Shroud 12-inch radius morale checks every single turn and possibly running off the table. What was interesting about that was the fact that for a while, Games Workshop for a while is like 4 or 5 months or a year. The Necron Codex was so old, it wasn't FAQ'd. And the way of course, GW doesn't support it, the way you would read the Codex versus the rules, Space Marines had, and they shall know no fear, which means they're kind of immune to morale checks. Same thing with Chaos Space Marines being fearless, and they shall know no rules. But because the Necron Codex was so old and not updated and poorly supported, it bypassed that. So you would go to tournaments and, hey, this is what GW says. These are the rules, bro. Popping off my Nightmare Shroud. All your long fangs with Wolfguard and stuff hanging out in the back with your 30 missile launchers are all running off the table. So seeing trends like that, playing different games, supporting 40K. Jumping into BattleTech. BattleTech is another game that I've kept a lot of logs for because I want to see the type of machines that I play, and I want to see the type of missions that they kind of go up against. And what this started was, I'm fortunate to have a nice-sized BattleTech collection. I've got my favorite machines that I like to play, but I want to make sure all my machines get into rotation, and to a lesser or greater extent, tanks also. So I'll record the lances that I play. The lances, this is a much smaller format. Here's the lance I play. Here's the lance I went up against. Here's the terrain, grass map A, grass map B, city fight, city tech. Here's the mission. And then 1 or 2 lines of like, Valkyrie was great at long range, or Banshee got its head blown off turn 2. What can I do about that, right? Just some ideas to see what I've played over time and the win or loss. But not so much the win or loss there, because I've played BattleTech longer than 40K. I mean, I want to win. I'm going to try and win, but do I really need to win at this point? I mean, we want to have some fun rolling some dice. So it's more like lance versus lance. What did I play? What did I notice? And that was instrumental in helping me find certain combinations, certain what I call buddy mechs or teammate mechs that, yes, you're supposed to work together as a lance, but 2 mechs that could stand side by side and bro fist each other that work extremely, extremely well. Some good combinations with the Hunchback, some good combinations with the Javelin. I don't know if I necessarily would have discovered those without kind of looking at this short format. Jumping into board games and then D&D. So board games are interesting because we have all these expansions, and I want to get all the expansions, and I want to play all the expansions. And when I think my collection's good and I've got a lot of dungeon crawlers, a new dungeon crawler comes out. So I do log all the games that I play. Now, socially, yes, I enjoy playing board games, but that is a smaller aspect of my hobby focus in terms of going to a club and playing with friends. Usually when I go to the club, it's going to be a wargaming type event, although board gaming does happen also. And I enjoy it and I love it. Most of my board gaming is in fact solo. That doesn't necessarily reflect the titles, but what I keep track of is what's the game. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Crunch the numbers, got the charts, got all the stuff. What's the game? When did I play it? What expansions were in play? Little check boxes. Win-loss, notes, and just from that perspective. And then I can sort it. I can analyze it. And that's just more of a curiosity just to see the type of games that I've enjoyed over time and certain titles that have risen to the top. And titles that rise to the top, they've given me an idea of the type of games that I like to play. And these are not only games in my collection. These are games that I've played at the club, or I've played at kind of mini conventions that some other clubs will have. I'll log it occasionally, so I'm playing as I'm home, or I'll just write it down on the back of an envelope or some scrap paper. And then when I get enough of scraps of paper, I'll put it into Excel and follow it there. What's been interesting there has been games like Runebound. Certainly, that's probably the oldest game I own. For second edition Runebound. I think I picked it up in 2008 or 2009. I want to say 2008. Whenever Descent first edition came out, they were like the 2 purchases that I jumped into board gaming with. So I crunch the numbers. 2008 yeah, Runebound has the most plays because I've had it the longest, but it's also a game I enjoy. There's other titles that were pretty recent to my collection, like Dark Souls, that also are kind of up there, top 10. Pathfinder Adventure card game. And, these are somewhat recent games, although Pathfinder Adventure card game's out of print. Dark Souls isn't that old. It's still in print. So that's just kind of like, here are the type of games that I played. This is like what I enjoy. And it gives me an idea of titles. So when I feel like, wow, these are the 5 games I've been regularly playing the last 6 months, what are the mechanics like? What is the game like? And maybe there's some other titles I want to look at. All right, D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. So some of my games I've logged. Early on in D&D, I never did that. I didn't do that. I draw a couple of maps. That's it. And a lot of those games are etched into my mind and memory and exist there. But when I really started to become a DM, I would, of course, have my world notes, but I would keep notes as my players played through the game. And I have one campaign in particular that if we play the campaign, it's about a year. If we're playing like once a week, every other week, pretty regularly, it'll take about a year to play. Start it in D&D 3.x, ran it in 4, ran it in 5. I mean, I've been through it 6 or 7 times. I have the DM notes and I have the world notes of the players playing through it. And it's been interesting to see how it's the same campaign, but it has evolved differently based on the players and their player personality. And those notes are just kind of like maybe a page of what happened in the session or some of the reactions to different NPCs. And I've used that for real-time feedback where if you were one of the first players in this campaign, and some players have been through it multiple times. They've been good at keeping the spoilers to themselves for new players. But even they've noticed over time, the world and the campaign has evolved real time based on what someone did previously. Hey, this was a great interaction. This was a great idea. You took it in this direction. I'm going to permanently write that into the story. And some players have been immortalized over time. So they've changed the world. There'll be a tribute to the world. There's a statue of them or kind of a portrait. The players from a long time ago, one of the first games, there were 2 dwarven players, and they have their portraits permanently created and in this certain inn. And every time there's also an iron golem outside holding a sign that's related to them. It's all kind of rusted and demagified. Is that such a word? That's been like 20 years or something crazy like that. That the changes that they had to the world I still honor because we played that world for like a year together. We shared that time, those memories, those dice real time. So as a D&D player, I will keep track of that. On the player side, I do regularly keep notes of the games I've played in with the characters I've played in because I tend to play, and there's many ways to do this, I tend to play the same 4 or 5 characters over multiple editions of D&D. And often what will happen if there will be for every edition of D&D, well, I'll play all 5, I'll tend to kind of focus and pick just one. Because look, if you've been playing D&D for a while, you know this is true. This is the best version of D&D. It's the final version, D&D Ultimate. We're going to support it forever. Look at all these supplements we're putting out. Look at all these adventures. Look at all these custom dice. We love you. Please buy it. Then you start hearing whispers. New edition coming. No, never a new edition. Just buy more books. Oh, reset, new edition, buy all new stuff. So, and it's going to happen. There's a lot of people that think 5.5 is just going to be like a slight update and your stuff's still going to be useful. No, it's not. They're going to reboot everything and make you rebuy everything. So I do tend to focus on these same characters, but in every new edition, I'll pick like 1 or 2. And like, this is the character that I'm going to spend in this edition. So these notes literally going back to AD&D, taking and passing the test of the Tower of High Sorcery, which is one of my proudest D&D moments. It's kind of interesting to look back at those notes. When do I look back at my player notes? Maybe like once a year. And again, a lot of it is theater of the mind. A lot of it's in my head. There's these giant boxes in the back of my closet where if I'm moving stuff or I'm trying to get stuff out or make some room, it's like, oh yeah, wow, look, my D&D notes. And like I'll just pull them out and flip through them and look through them and have that perspective from it. But it's also interesting from another perspective to see just where I was at the time in life as a player with my player personality through those D&D player notes. Because again, these are the same characters that I've played regularly through multiple editions. So same class, same background, same idea, but always a little different, or the focus was a little different. And it's kind of a laugh to myself being like, where was my head at that moment? What was going on at that time? And really exploring it and looking at it. Okay, so number one rule, of course, play the games first. That's always been the rule. Always play the games. But logging certain games, keeping an analysis of certain games, they've served me for different reasons at different times. Whether that's trying to get competitive at 40K really fast, whether that's looking for lance combinations in Battletech, or D&D looking at the journey, or just crunching my own numbers board game-wise to be like, I need another dungeon crawler. Here's the dungeon crawlers I've been playing. Here's the one with the most plays. Let's kind of log the rules and see what happens, and maybe we can map and find another or a newer dungeon crawler with similar rules to add to the collection. And board gamers, you know how that is. Anything that you can use to justify a new purchase in your collection, look, you're going to do it, right?